So, multiple choice questions. I'll say very little and let you sort of fathom out the answers.
I'm ready.
Indeed. Answer B. So the answer is A. And A again for voltmet. But remember what ATIS is as well, in that it's information for aircraft arriving and departing at a specific airfield. And I'm sure in your flying sort of time, you're far more likely to listen to an ATIS than you are to a voltmet. Voltmet's handy if you're going over long distances and you can listen to various groups of weather as you go along that flight to make sure it's okay as you go along. But ATIS is for a specific airfield. The answer is C. So we discussed what an ATIS is, and it's broadcast on a discrete frequency or from an appropriate VOR, which is a VHF radio beacon. And there's one at Manchester, so you can either listen to the Manchester ATIS frequency, or if you've got the capability to tune in a VOR, you can listen to the weather on that. So in some ways, if you've got sort of a radio navigation aid in your aircraft, you can continue listening on the communication frequency to whoever you're communicating with, but you can obtain the information from the airfield by tuning into the VOR. And the answer is C. B, 118.6, because the two rules are, normally we say all three decimal places, unless the last two of the decimal places are zeros when we knock off those two zeros. And in this case, the frequency becomes 118.6. The answer is A. First thing, last two letters. That's really all you need to remember. First thing, last two letters. So if you call yourself Microlite Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, the abbreviated version is Microlite Charlie Delta. But if you call yourself Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, then the abbreviation is Golf Charlie Delta because it's first thing, last two letters. This is A. And notice actually the question where it says the call sign may be abbreviated by the pilot, not must have been abbreviated by the pilot. So therefore, if you start thinking, oh, do you know, I can't remember whether the controller abbreviated it or not, it doesn't matter, just use the full call sign. You can use the full call sign every time if you want to. It's only that you can abbreviate it once it's been abbreviated by air traffic. So we know 5 is perfectly readable. So the answer is, in this case, 3. 5 is 5 is perfectly readable. 4 is readable. 3 is readable but with difficulty. And 2, well, that's A. Now and then, now then, now then.
Yeah, the audio still turn it on.
So if we use the QFE, I'll just do it. I'll just do a bit of muting for the moment. There we go. So the answer is height. If we're at QFE, we're at a height. So what about altitude? Well, if we're flying at an altitude, then it's QNH. Special VFR. Oh, it's a sort of interesting topic. As I've said before, it's a legal fudge that allows you to operate inside a control zone. So just a control zone when the visibility is below VFR minima. But you're still responsible for keeping clear of cloud, keeping clear of high ground, keeping the surface in sight. And the answer is D. True bearing. Well, the only one with a T in it is out of the 4 choices, QTE. And fair enough. Sure enough, rather, that's the answer. And I changed this one from last week because if you remember, it said something about the magnetic bearing to reach the VDF station. So I've chopped it down to what is the correct description of this Q code. And the answer is D, QDM. What might you give at the end of a VDF call? And at some phase during this practical part, we'll be doing one of these. So you'll certainly know it for sure then. And the answer is A, the aircraft's call sign. And it just elongates the call a little bit. And also, when the controller reads off the bearing in the tower, you're saying the call sign at the same time, and it just confirms that that call sign is for that bearing. Two times 5 equals 10, and therefore the answer for this is B. Whoops, sorry, that's a bit quick. Whoops. Stand by. There we go. B. Stupid thing. Kind of given the answer away a little bit there, so we won't dwell on this. But if the controller wants you to confirm the code that you've got set on your transponder, then the answer is, of course, B, confirm squawk. And the answer to this is confirm level. So this is to verify the accuracy of the mode Charlie information being displayed. The controller will ask you to confirm level, and you read back the level that's indicated on your altimeter. Not that your altimeter is transmitting the mode Charlie, that's a completely separate capsule, but it gives an independent check that the mode Charlie information is correct. The answer for this is C, a distress situation. And remember, 7600 is radio failure. 7500 is a hijack. And the answer to this one is D, just so that there's a positive yes or no. And of course, disregard means C, ignore. And feel free to use that in the RT practical test. If you use words like correction, stand by, say again, disregard, you're not marked down at all because you're using standard phraseology to recover from the issue. So if it's change frequency and listen out on that frequency, B, monitor. And the answer for this one, of course, is Roger. And that's all Roger means, received. It doesn't mean understood. It just means received. The answer is D. And remember, you only say this on first contact with the ground station. So you prefix your call sign on first contact with the ground station with the word student, which means that you're a student pilot flying solo. And of course, we never say ready for takeoff. The word is ready for departure. So therefore, if we say ready for departure, then it's not going to be answer A. It's not after being cleared to line up, because sometimes when you say that you're ready for departure, they just clear you to take off from there. So it's not answer B. Sometimes they'll ask you to line up, which means enter the runway and come to a stop, and then clear you for takeoff. But that's not always the case. So the answer in this one is D. So this is a conditional clearance. And we know from last week that all runway instructions have to be read back. We can't say Wilco or we can't say Roger. We have to read it back. And for this conditional clearance, we have to read back in full and include the reiteration of the condition that it's behind the landing A320. So the answer is D. And this really, you would only see if you were taking off or landing as an airfield that's inside controlled airspace. When we go to Barton, Dairy House Farm, Slape, there's no controlled airspace, so they don't clear us in or clear us out. But if we're learning to fly, say, at Liverpool or Leeds or East Midlands or Birmingham, there's a control zone around those airfields. So before they clear you for takeoff, they clear you to leave controlled airspace. They clear you out of the zone. So you might say that you're ready for departure, and the controller might say, Golf Charlie Delta, hold position after departure, cleared directly to the zone boundary, not above 2,500 feet, QNH 1005, squawk 4356. It's a route clearance, so you have to read it all back. And then once you've read it back, then in due course, they'll clear you for takeoff. So, and that's why they use the word after departure, because at that point, you're not cleared for takeoff. And I say that because many times I've heard of aircraft that have been given this route clearance and have taken off, which is why this question is here, to highlight the fact that nowhere does it say clear for takeoff. So it's just a route clearance out of the control zone, not a takeoff clearance. So the answer is D. And as we go through the practical side of things, the next couple of weeks, we'll be doing this partial message call all the time. So this will become second nature. And so it should, because this is the call, as I've said before, where the controller measures your ability by how you sound, that the items are in the correct order, that it's concise and said with confidence. So it's important to think about this call before actually giving it. And of course, the answer is D. Call sign and type, departure and destination, position and level, and any additional details. And of course, for the majority, for the flight, the majority of the call stays the same. So every time you call up a new place, the call sign stays the same, the type stays the same, departure and destination. The only thing that changes is your current position and possibly your level, your altitude, height, or flight level, and maybe your additional details. More about that shortly. So the two classifications for emergency message, well, the phraseology, we know it's Mayday and Pan-Pan, but what are the types? What are the classifications of a call? Well, there'd be distress and urgency. The difference between an urgency call and a distress call, as I'm sure you know, an urgency doesn't require immediate assistance, whereas a distress, which is a Mayday call, does require immediate assistance. So based on that, we can tell pretty quickly that the answer is B. You'll be pleased to hear that when we do the practical test, you're given an aid memoir to help you with a few of the different items in the practical test. And one of the items is the items for an emergency call. So in the practical test, you will have these items anyway, but I seem to recall there's a possibility that one question that comes up in the multiple choice exam is, otherwise it wouldn't be in here, is the items required for an emergency call. And the answer is D. Who you're talking to, your call sign, your type, what's happened and what you're going to do about it, position, level and heading, pilot's qualification, and if required, any other information. Well, if you hear a Mayday from another aircraft, the answer is D. You relay the message on the frequency in use, making it clear that the aircraft relaying the message is not itself in distress. And more about this later on tonight. And the answer is C, once on the dead side of the runway. I know the B also says once on the dead side of the runway, but it says always the right-hand side, but that's not the case at all. That's a total red herring. So 50 miles or 5 minutes before seems a good bet, but is it whichever is the sooner or whichever is the later? And the answer is A. Oh, and that's it. That's it, guys. Now, if you don't do your multiple choice exam for a few weeks for some reason, holidays or busy at work or whatever, I can send you these multiple choice questions. So I can always forward you the questions if you wanted to revise, but they don't come with any answers. That's up to you to sort of work out what the answers are. Feel free to have a look at them. I will give you some guidance on the answers, but initially, if you do want those questions, I'll certainly send them to you, but they don't come with the answers. I don't want to make it too easy for you, but if you knew all those answers, you'd have, believe me, have no problem with the actual multiple choice exam, which is only 12 questions. They are asked a bit more in a slightly different way, but the actual topic, every topic within the actual questions is represented in those questions we've just done. But as I say, if you want to revisit them between now and when you come to do the exam, feel free to get in contact. So let's move over to the practical side of things, if I can get that fired up. One second, I think the standby is the word. So this looks like the one. Now, you might notice that I have changed the jet over to an auto gyro. So we are now fully inclusive on this course. Diversity and inclusion ticks the box perfectly. If you're an auto gyro, but you identify as a PA28, then that's fine by me. We are fully diversified. So, and interestingly, in any of these aircraft, your FRTOL license is valid. So if you're flying a flex-wing microlight at the moment, your RT license is valid in a hot air balloon, an auto gyro, a glider, any aircraft. It's not just an RT license for what you're flying at the moment. And remember, this FRTOL lasts for life, so you're never examined again. There's no currency checks, there's no check after 5 years. Once you've done the multiple choice exam, once you've done the practical test, your FRTOL is issued by the CAA once you apply for it, and it lasts forever. So if you go on and fly an A380, you're using the same RT license as you did now, and you're never tested in your RT. And this is why you look at some of these things and you think, well, they don't apply to me. Well, the reason for that is they don't apply to you now, but it's possible they might apply in the future. So we have to cover the whole syllabus to ensure we've got it covered as such. One thing that you need to do, though, is to keep yourself current. Things change. Phraseology changes, procedures change, laws change, but you won't have any exams or any currency checks on those changes. So that's for you to sort out. There's a good CAA website that has got all the changes on, called Skywise. And Skywise, it just promulgates information that changes within general aviation. And you can put in your details for Skywise and you can tick what boxes you want to receive a change information on. It might be just auto gyros, or you might be interested in any powered aircraft and you can tick all the boxes. Or you might just be interested in Boeing 747s, but it's probably a poor choice there. Let's say you're interested in flying instructor stuff or flying examiner stuff, and you can tick all the appropriate boxes. And whenever there's a change, there's a Skywise that's promulgated, and that will keep you current. There's another interesting publication, and I'll tell you what, I'll dig out the web link for it, called the Skyway Code. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the Skyway Code. It's a good little CAA pamphlet that gives information in a simple manner of all the rules of the air, and it's called the Skyway Code. It's kind of based on the Highway Code, but is available free of charge for general aviation pilots. And I think it's a really good little guide, again, just to flick through every now and again to keep yourself current. So I'll send you the link for that as well. Well, we've done this, so we won't do that again. So the practical test, practical test is far more fun than a boring old multiple choice paper. And things have changed in the practical test since the last course I did. When I did the last course, it was done in a 4-seater Cessna 172 on a fictitious route from A to B, where various things happened. But that's changed now to a route on an actual map. You get to decide what map you want to use. I get to decide what route we're going to fly. And it'll be a sort of 50-minute route that we'll fly virtually using an RT simulator. And you think, wow, that sounds good, RT simulator. Well, it's just a glorified intercom, really. It's a box with a press-to-talk switch. It's got a proper aviation headphones in there. And then it's connected to cable where I've got something similar, and I sit in a separate room. So we're not face-to-face when we do this RT exam. It's as if you're in the aircraft, I'm on the ground, I do the air traffic control-y type calls, you do the flying calls. Everything that you say is recorded and kept for quality auditing by the CAA. So I have to keep the recordings for, or the last 5 recordings for 3 years, so that the CAA can always say, oh, could I just have a listen to Fred Bloggs' RT exam? So it needs to be right. We need to ensure that it's right, because there's evidence to show your ability. And to give you some practice, once we've done this course, everyone who's paid for, who pays for the RT exam, gets a free 2-hour one-to-one on Zoom. So at the moment, we're doing it in a course format, but at the end of the 5 weeks, as we move into actually doing the practical test, we'll have a one-to-one session going through this route, so that you just get practice, because that's what it's all about. And that's why I think there's a lot of value in volunteering to do the RT during this course, because it gives you practice. And there's a lot of people out there that 100% know everything, but they struggle to talk to someone that they can't see the other person face to face. So by doing the RT in the course here, you get practice. But more importantly, when we meet for a couple of hours, you'll have even more practice. So hopefully then, when we do the exam route, you should feel quite comfortable and come over well, and it'll be recorded. And everything that happens on this fictitious route we're going to do for the next couple of weeks happens in reality. Relay Mayday, PAN call, QTE call, maths penetration. We'll be looking at all these things over the next couple of weeks, but they will happen in the actual exam. The only difference is the exam route is a route around probably 60-mile route around the UK that goes through a maths, that goes through a bit of controlled airspace, that has a point where I can fit a Relay Mayday in. So, and to assist you with that at the start, you get some bits of information. You get an 8 memoir, as I'll show you next week. You get a list of frequencies that I'll show you next week. And you get a flight log that I'll show you next week. You bring along the map, although if you are short of a map, I've got plenty spare here. And we draw some lines on it. And then you run through it, or rather we run through it using the RT simulator, doing the calls as if it was real. But what I want to do initially is get rid of all the sort of topographical information, all the airspace, just so that we can concentrate on the RT. The other advantage of a new exam, one other thing I was going to say is you get 20 minutes preparation time. So once we've had a chat about the route and what could happen on that route, you get 20 minutes preparation time before we do the talking through the route. And the talking through the route lasts about 20 minutes. And then after that, there's 10 minutes of verbal questioning on things that we've done in the course. And that's it. The practical test is completed and job's a good one. You can't do the practical test until you've passed the multiple choice exam. So it is a requirement that you have to have passed the multiple choice exam before you can do the practical test. So that's the one that we need to concentrate on first of all. But the other thing with the practical test now is it can be done in an aircraft and a call sign of your choice. So to keep it simple here, we're going to be in Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, and the people that are going to do the RT tonight, the 6 people that have volunteered, you can use whatever type you normally fly, whether it's an autogyro, whether it's a flex wing night flight, whether it's a C-42, whether it's a PA-38, just give the type that you want to give. And then when you come for the practical test, you can use a call sign of your choice and the type of your choice. So I sent you some information, some flight details about this flight. I'm not too bothered whether you've printed it off, although I asked to print the front page off. And the reason I'm not too bothered is I've changed it slightly and I've kind of sent you a bit of old information. So it's not critical that we use that stuff I gave you. I'm going to send you another one for next week. And all it does in this new one is it highlights that we don't have to use this call sign. We don't have to use this type. But we're still going to go from a fictitious place called Blackwood to destination Westley. And our alternative, if there's any problems, is a place called Tidemouth. On board, we've got a single radio, we've got a transponder, but in this case, it has no mode Charlie. What's mode Charlie? Well, it's altitude capability. So it just makes it that much more important to report any level changes as we go along, because of course the controller can't see it on its radar screen. Pilot's qualifications, PPL, professional pilot's license. If I was going to a party, I'd leave out this private bit sort of thing, you know, people don't need to know that. Purely PPL, professional pilot's license. And believe me, you've got far more flying ability than the captain of the aircraft taking you off on your holidays, because of course they take off, get to 500 feet, blip onto autopilot, newspaper comes out, and the rest of the way, the aircraft flies itself, comes round, starts a descent, into land. The aircraft would quite happily land itself and do an auto land, but the pilot probably thinks, oh, probably better give it a go. So they take control at about 500 feet. And sometimes, I know when you've been on your holidays, it feels like you've been shot down rather than touchdown because it lands with a thump. Had the pilot let the aircraft fly itself, would have done a smooth landing. And you know when you're coming into land, sorry, no, let's go a bit further out. Once you've still got your gin and tonic on the tray table, when the autopilot's flying the plane, that gin and tonic is as steady as a rock. You can fill the tonic right up to the top of the glass and it doesn't spill over the edges. And yet you sort of come into Manchester, you run downwind over the city centre, onto base leg over Odenshaw reservoirs, then a right turn onto the instrument landing system, get to about Stockport, and suddenly there's all sorts of noises. The throttle starts going back and forwards, there's clonking, people start gripping hold of a seat in front. Well, that's once the pilot has taken control. So had he let the aircraft fly, I'm sure the aircraft would have been still as smooth as a die. So therefore, if the airline pilot is on a flight to Tenerife, a 4-hour flight, they only get to fly it for what, 3 or 4 minutes. Whereas when you go for your flight and you go for an hour's flight, you fly it for an hour. So you've got far more time on the controls than the airline pilot who's operating basically a computer at the front of the aircraft nowadays. So based on that, I think we could quite easily call ourselves professional pilot's license, but I suppose we best call ourselves private so we don't upset these other pilots. Then we have the flight log, and you don't need to know, well, in fact, you don't really need to know anything about this flight log. If you're up to navigation, it might look familiar. The wind aloft is 2705 knots. We know our airborne time of 1016. From Blackwood to Banksfield, our track is 110 degrees. But because of the wind, if we steered a track of 110 degrees, we'd never actually get to Banksfield because we'd be blown off slightly to one side. So therefore, we would either use what's called a flight computer, which is a circular slide rule, which you'll never use again once you've completed your PPL. It will go straight onto eBay and you'll use an iPhone app. But until that time, we do a calculation to determine what heading to fly to maintain a track across ground. So the track is our movement across ground. The heading is what we steer on our compass or our direction indicator to maintain that track of 110 degrees. And because we've got the wind behind us, even though our airspeed is 90 knots, our speed across the ground is 95 knots. We know the distance is 13 miles. Of course, we wouldn't say 13, but 13 miles. And 13 miles at 95 knots will take us 20 minutes. Now, when we do the RT practical test, it's at your own pace. You don't have to wait 13 minutes from Blackwood to Bank. So it'd be a lot of finger tapping if we did that. It's entirely at your own pace. This flight log is just to make it look a bit more real. You can work out any estimates by adding these times to your airborne time. So if it's 13 minutes from Blackwood to Banksfield, your estimate for Banksfield would be your airborne time plus 13 minutes, 1029. And then it's another 17 minutes to North Point. So 1029 plus 17, 1046. And then another 12 minutes to Newton, 1058. Once you start getting up to 60, don't forget to start a new hour, because it gets very embarrassing if you say you estimate Southhead at 1072. Obviously, it's not correct at all. So once you get to 60, you need to start a new hour. But if you gave just random times, that's fine. That's fine. It's not what the time is that's important, but how you say it. That you either say 2 separate digits for the minute or 4 separate digits for the hour and the minutes if you feel there's any confusion. And also you can fly along at any level. If you want to fly along at 2,500 feet, that's fine. If you want to fly along at 3,300 feet or 1,800 feet, that's also fine. Because the important thing is it's not what it is, but how you say it that's important. So if you said you were flying at 2,500 feet or 2,500 feet, that would be wrong, even though that's what it says the value is there, because of course we say whole thousands, whole hundreds, and combinations of thousands and whole hundreds. So that level would be 2,500 feet, 3,000 feet, 1,500 feet, and flight level 3.5. And I think I can probably safely say that in your PPL flying, you'll probably never use a flight level. Next, we have some frequencies. So the first column is the name of the place. The second column is the type of service being provided. And we know TWR and APP and RAD indicate air traffic control service. AFIS is Aerodrome Flight Information Service, not to be confused with ATIS, of course. And this is like a Barton where they say land at your discretion, take off at your discretion. And it also provides VHF direction finding. Third column is the call sign. That's what you call them. So that's the station's call sign and the frequency that that station transmits and receives on. And it was, I must admit, in fact, let me do one step more. In the how would we say these frequencies, we're working on that rule of normally we say all 3 decimal places. Down the bottom here, we would say 122.375, 130.175, 119.250. But of course, if the last 2 zeros, the last 2 of the 3 decimal places zeros, we knock those 2 zeros off and this becomes 120.1, 118.7. But what about this one? Well, it's still the same rule. We knock just the last 2 zeros off. So this is 126.0. And you know, it was only when I was looking at this the other day, and I thought, well, actually, these frequencies aren't correct now because they're 25 kilohertz frequencies. They don't occur like this nowadays. So I've made a change, and hopefully if I can find the right one, we can move straight into it. Let's have a look here. So here we go. Moving on to this one, which is the new version. Sorry, just 1 second. Slight technical hitch. So this is a new version, and I've grayed out the call signs so that we know we can use whatever call sign we like now. We can use whatever type we like. The flight loggers remain the same, but the frequencies have changed to what they are nowadays, 8.33 kilohertz frequencies. And notice that based on those, you never get 2 zeros at the end, apart from the emergency frequency, which has just stayed as the emergency frequency. So in reality now, you're never going to have to worry about whether it's got 2 zeros on the end, because all 8.33 kilohertz frequencies never do. So from now on, frequencies in reality, you just say them as you see them: 120.105, 119.255, 128.660. So I thought from now on, when I send this information out, it'll have a new frequency. So I'll send them to you, and I'll tell you what the frequencies are when people go through it this week. But next week, if you want to print this sheet off to see what the frequencies are as we go along. Then we're going to fly this route down through Blackwood, Banksfield. We're not going to fly down this airway because as private pilots without an instrument rating, we can't fly down the airway. So we're going to fly underneath the airway, down to Wesley. Various things going to happen as we go along. We're going to have to get a military air traffic zone crossing. We're going to hear a Mayday call here that there's no reply to, and we'll have to relay it. And then after North Point, we've become a bit unsure of our position, so we'll get a QTE from Typemouth. After Newton, a pan call, and then continue round to land at Wesley. But if the weather's bad at Wesley, we're going to divert to Typemouth. But this is what we'll be working our way through over the next couple of weeks. Well, we're going to get to tonight, probably somewhere around North Point, I would imagine. And then next week, we'll start right at the very start again. But what we'll find is that RT is very samey. The challenge response, the items we give and the format that we give it in is very samey. So therefore, if we know the first third, it's relatively easy to work out the next 2/3 of this route. So we're going to start at Blackwood, and we are going to use this new frequency that we talked about, which is Blackwood Tower on the new frequency 120.105, Blackwood Tower. Now, this is just a generic airfield. This isn't what happens at Barton. This isn't what happens at Slape. This isn't what happens at Harden at Chester. This is just something where you can demonstrate your RT for an RT exam, but get all the information required. And the first thing that we're going to have a look at is doing a radio check. Now, I know if you said to your instructor, "Oh, before we go, we'll do a radio check," your instructor will probably say, "Bugger the radio checks, let's just get going," sort of thing, because that's what tends to happen in reality. Flying school aircraft are used all the time, so the radio's kept nice and warm and dry. The headsets are kept in frequent use. But maybe our aircraft, we've just pulled out the back of a hangar and we haven't flown it for a few months. So we might want to check radio to prove that it's working okay. And it also means it shows how we would do a radio check if we ever wanted to do a radio check. And the phraseology out of the CAA's Radiotelephony, CAP 413, says that we say their call sign, which in our case is Blackwood Tower, our call sign, and we're just going to use Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta all the time because it keeps it nice and simple. The word radio check and the frequency. And we know the frequency for Blackwood Tower here is 120.105. So that's how we would go about doing a radio check. So this is where we call on the services of Alan Vaughan, who has kindly volunteered to assist. And therefore, Alan, if you're off mute, would you kindly give me what you would say for the radio check at Blackwood Tower?
Blackwood Tower, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, radio check 120.105.
Perfect, Alan, perfect. And your job is done now for 6. The 5 other people will have a go from now on, so you can go back onto mute and the job is done. So a perfect radio check from Alan. And notice how many words we've probably cut out, like, can I have a radio check, and good morning and good afternoon and please and all that. All that goes out of the window and we just do a radio check with just those words there. So Anthony, if you're on frequency, I can see your mic's on mute at the moment, but if you're there, they'll come back to you and say, Golf Charlie Delta, this is Blackwood Tower, your readability 5. And then Anthony, you need to say what readability they are to you. So you might say, your readability 5 also, Golf Charlie Delta, or your readability 4, Golf Charlie Delta. So Anthony, if they said to you, Golf Charlie Delta, Blackwood Tower, your readability 5, what would you say in response?
Readability, Boston Tower, your readability is 5, Golf Charlie Delta.
Perfect, perfect. And your job is done. Thank you, Anthony. So notice a couple of things there now. So remember, once satisfactory communication has been established, you no longer have to say Blackwood Tower. So when you call them and ask for a radio check, and they come back to you and say your readability 5, from then on, you can just say Golf Charlie Delta this, Golf Charlie Delta that. And that's the same in reality. If you call up Slape to land at Slape, after you've established communication, you've talked to them, they've talked back to you. From then on, you can just say Golf Charlie Delta this, Golf Charlie Delta that, as long as obviously they've abbreviated your call sign. Now notice when Anthony said your readability 5, Golf Charlie Delta, he quite correctly used his call sign at the end of the message. And the kind of answer to that is, you can always give a call sign at the start if you want, but you can only give it at the end, as Anthony quite rightly did, when replying back. So whenever you're responding straight back to air traffic, you can give your call sign at the end. And the advantage of that is you can't write too much down, especially if you're in a flex wing like light or an open top auto gyro. You know, you've got to keep hold of your pen. So you can't sort of easily scribble things down. So therefore, it's a lot easier to read back what you've just been given followed by something that you know, such as your call sign. And you know, if you're in the office and someone gives you a phone number and you think, nobody talked to me, because as soon as you talk about something else, that number will go straight out of your mind. And it's the same here, the fact that if you read back the information followed by your call sign, you can hold it in your mind a bit easier and just read back what you've been given, followed by something that you know, which is your call sign. So well done, Anthony, that's great. So we checked the radio. We've called up, requested a radio check. They've told us that we're readability 5 to them. We've said to them that they're readability 5 to us, or readability 4. So we checked the radio. So the next thing that we have to do is to get some aerodrome information. And remember, we're on frequency now. We're already on the Blackwood Tower frequency because we've done the radio check. So all we need to do is add our abbreviated call sign to the request aerodrome information, because we're already on Blackwood's frequency. So we no longer have to say their station call sign. They have abbreviated our call sign, so we can use the abbreviated version. So therefore, David, over to you. How would you give the request for aerodrome information? And before I get David to do it, the other thing is to say that some people might call it airfield details. Some people might call it aerodrome details. Some people might call it airfield information, some aerodrome information, but it's the same thing. It gives us the runway, the wind, and the 2 pressure settings. So David, when you're ready, if you'd like, please, to request the aerodrome information.
Golf Charlie Delta, request aerodrome information.
Good. And they'll come back and say, Golf Charlie Delta, it's runway 27, surface wind 2705 knots, QNH 1012, QFE 1010. And the question to everyone is, do we have to read all of that back? Do we have to read all of that back? And the answer is no. We know we have to read runway back. Runway and runway instructions we have to read back. We know we have to read the pressure settings back. Even if we've got no intention of using them, we still have to read back the pressure settings so that the radio operator knows that we received them correctly. So the thing that we don't read back is the surface wind, and we never read back the surface wind. When they clear us for takeoff or say takeoff for your discretion and give us the wind, we never read the wind back. But we always have to read the runway and the pressure settings back. So this falls upon Simon if you're there. And remember, Simon, of course, you're reading information, so you can give the runway and the pressure settings and then your call sign at the end if you wish, because you're reading the information back. So when you're ready, Simon, take it away.
Okay. Runway 27, 1012 QNH, 1010 QFE, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta.
Perfect. So that's great. And you think, well, the call sign was abbreviated before. Well, that doesn't matter. You can abbreviate the call sign if you wish. And if you think, oh, I can't remember if they abbreviated the call sign, doesn't matter. Just use the full call sign. So that's great. Runway 27, QNH 1012, QFE 1010. And I think we discussed a couple of weeks ago that if you just jotted down 2 numbers, the highest number is always the QNH. So that's great. So we look at the runway 27, the wind's 2705, so it's within limits. We might twiddle the altimeter, make sure when we select the QNH, our altimeter reads above sea level. when we select the QFE, our altimeter reads 0 because we're sat on the ground. And so the next thing, Steve, is to request taxi.
Golf Charlie Delta, request taxi.
Good, good. So the next one is yours, Jen. So sorry, I'm just trying to get the text facility up, and then I'll give a response. So the one for Jen will be Golf Charlie Delta taxi via taxiway Alpha to holding point Alpha 1. So therefore, taxi instructions we have to read back. So therefore, Jen, what would we say? Are you there, Jen? Unless you may be on. Oh, yes, you're on mute, Jen. And not to worry, we'll move back to Alan. Alan, so back to you. For if they said Golf Charlie Delta, taxi via taxiway Alpha to holding point Alpha 1, what would you say in response?
Taxi via taxiway Alpha to holding point Alpha 1, Golf Charlie Delta.
Perfect, perfect. And you can see this format is starting to arise where the controller tells you what to do, you read it back and give your call sign at the end. And then back to you, Anthony, they'll say, Golf Charlie Delta, report ready for departure. And of course, what one word can you say that means that you will comply? I know you know what it is, Anthony. So when they say to you, Golf Charlie Delta, report ready for departure, what would you say in response?
Wilco, Golf Charlie Delta.
Perfect, perfect. And whenever you hear the word report, you can equal Wilco. I know you're off, I can see you're off mute now, Jen, so we'll give you the next call. So they might say to you, Golf Charlie Delta, line up, runway 27.
Line up, runway 27, Golf Charlie Delta.
Good, good, excellent. That's your work complete at the moment because it moves on to the next person. Now, back to David, they might say, Golf Charlie Delta, runway 27 cleared for takeoff, surface wind 2605 knots. It's a runway instruction, so we have to read it back. Remember, we don't need to read the wind back. So if they said to you, Golf Charlie Delta, cleared for takeoff, runway 27, surface wind 2605 knots, what would you say in response?
Clear for takeoff, Golf Charlie Delta.
Good, good. I'd probably also include the runway. One, because the runway should always be read back, and also because it's the final opportunity for you to check that you're on the correct runway, because as we know, well, in fact, every airfield has two runways because they have two different ends to the same bit of tarmac or grass. So by giving the runway as well, runway is something we must read back. So by giving the runway as well, we can look and make sure we say runway 27, that our direction indicator says 270 degrees. Our compass says 270 degrees. We're on the correct runway, because many people, especially if the runways, the two thresholds are at the same place, people do line up on the wrong runway or come into land on the wrong runway. But maybe just reading back that runway designator might save yourself from it now. So off you go. Feel the phenomenal acceleration of a single engine piston aircraft as it accelerates down the runway, up into the air, just get airborne. And the controller might say to you, Simon, Golf Charlie Delta, report turning left. Now, you've only just got airborne, so you're not going to do it straight away. So what one word would you say plus your call sign that you will report turning left?
Wilco, Golf Charlie Delta.
Perfect, perfect. Because of course we're taking off on runway 27, which is off in this direction, but we need to turn left to come round onto this track. So you climb up to a safe height, maybe 500 feet above ground level. Remember that old adage, aviate, navigate and communicate. So fly the plane first, you start the left turn, you're happy that you're on the correct track. And then Steve, when you're ready, if you could say that you're turning left.
Golf Charlie Delta, turning left.
Golf Charlie Delta, contact Blackwood approach 119.255. So that is back to you, Jen. If they say to you, Golf Charlie Delta, contact Blackwood approach 119.255. Frequencies we have to read back. So therefore, what do you think you would say?
Golf Charlie Delta Blackwood approach 119255 Wilco.
Good. And in fact, by saying the frequency, there's no need to say Wilco, because just by saying the frequency, you're implying that you're changing. Or you could say Golf Charlie Delta changing to Blackwood approach 119.255. Or golf, or you could read back what they said, contact Blackwood approach 119.255. There's more than one way that you can say these things correctly. So we change over to Blackwood approach, change it on your radio, and then we need to establish communication on that frequency. And it's back to Alan again now. And the way that we do that to establish communication is we say their call sign, which is Blackwood approach, our call sign, which is Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, and then what we want to get out of the conversation. In this case, it might be request basic service. Remember what that basic service was? That's what really just the only thing we want to get out of our time on Blackwood approach. So we say Blackwood approach, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, request basic service. But hey, Alan, why should I do all the hard work? Over to you to give that call, if you'd be so kind.
Blackwood approach, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, request basic service.
And then on to you, Anthony. Golf Charlie Delta, it's a basic service. Report maintaining altitude 2,500 feet. Now, they're not telling you to climb to this level. They're just asking you to report maintaining altitude of 2,500 feet. So therefore, remember that word, that if you ever hear the word report, it equals a Wilco. So that makes it nice and easy. But of course, one thing that you do have to read back is the type of service, type of air traffic service. So therefore, Anthony, if they said to you, a Golf Charlie Delta, it's a basic service, report maintaining altitude 2,500 feet, what do you think you'd say?
Basic service, Wilco, Golf Charlie Delta.
Perfect, 100% perfect. So that's great. So you imagine yourself in your aircraft, you climb up to 2,500 feet, slowly get it up, especially if you got your hefty flying instructor who's had far too many cakes at Sleep. Because every time he sends you off solo, he goes and stuffs his face up in the tower. So he gets heavier and heavier, and they're for the aircraft climb slower and slower. But David, when you get up to 2,500 feet, what do you think you might say to say that you're maintaining 2,500 feet, quite simply?
Golf Charlie Delta maintaining 2,500 feet.
Exactly. So in a way, you're just saying what's in your mind. Perfect. And back to you, Simon. Golf Charlie Delta, Roger, report leading the frequency.
Wilco, Golf Charlie Delta.
Fantastic. Very well said. And you know, on that note, we're going to take a break for 15 minutes. So what we're going to do is going to take a break now. And the guys have done the RT, you've earned it, done a fantastic job. What we're going to do is we're going to take a break, and then we're going to go right back to the very start, do it all again. That'll only take 5 minutes, and then we'll continue on through the maths, do the relayed Mayday as well, and that will probably see us through for tonight. So let's take a break until 8:30. Obviously, you can leave everything switched on, and I'll see you back here in 15 minutes if you're happy. So I'll see you very shortly.
Charlie Delta.
This meeting is being recorded.
Good. Sorry, I forgot to start recording that. Excellent. So we do the power checks, we do the pre-takeoff checks. When we're ready to go, Anthony, what would we say? We wouldn't say that we're ready for takeoff. What would we say, sir?
Golf Charlie Delta, ready for departure.
Good. And over to you, David. They say Golf Charlie Delta via Alpha 1, line up runway 27.
Via Alpha 1, line up runway 27, Golf Charlie Delta.
Perfect. And Simon, in due course, a Golf Charlie Delta, runway 27, cleared for takeoff, surface wind 260, 4 knots.
Clear for takeoff. Runway 27, Golf Charlie Delta.
Perfect. Off we go, down the runway, up in the air, just get in the air, and they say to you, Steve, Golf Charlie Delta, report turning left.
Wilco, Golf Charlie Delta.
Good. So you climb up to a safe height, get up to say 500 feet, start the left turn. What would you then say, Jen? Quite simply, that you turn in left.
Golf Charlie Delta, turning left.
Good. Over to you, Alan. Golf Charlie Delta, contact Blackwood approach 119.255.
Contact Blackwood approach 119.255, Golf Charlie Delta.
Excellent. And what's great with all your calls is you're using the call sign in the correct format. You're using the call sign at the start when you're initiating the sort of sub-thread. You're using the call sign at the end when you're reading back information. You're not saying the station's call sign quite correctly. So it makes it sound really good, really professional. You haven't added any extra words or anything, so it's nice and concise. It's starting to come out with confidence. It's a nice pace. It's sounding really good. So you're doing a great job. So we change over to Blackwood approach. And I'm just trying to think, I must have missed who went then.
That was me, Alan.
Alan, sorry, Alan. Right, so it's Anthony next. Sorry, just lost track there. So Anthony, you need to establish communication on the Blackwood approach frequency. So you say their call sign, your call sign, and request basic service.
Blackwood approach, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, request basic service.
Good. And then to you, David, a Golf Charlie Delta Blackwood approach. It's a basic service. Report maintaining altitude 2,500 feet.
Basic service and report altitude 2,000 feet for Golf Charlie Delta.
And in fact, being the hopefully a decent controller, I picked up that you said 2,000 feet rather than 2,500 feet. Now that's an interesting case for had David said Wilco that he's totally entitled to do, I wouldn't have been able to pick up the fact that I said report maintaining 2,500 feet and he said report maintaining 2,000 feet. So sometimes you can see the advantage of reading things back rather than saying Wilco. I know it's a level, but it's not a level instruction. They're not telling you to climb to that level. They're just asking you to report maintaining that level. So therefore, Wilco is totally appropriate. And it would have been fine if David said that. But what it would have hidden was the fact that he said 2,000 feet when it was to report at 2,500 feet. So it's just an interesting point there, but that's fine. So over to you.
I could have nipped that in the bud because I realised what I'd said when I said it. So I could have just said correction 2,500 feet. Exactly.
And if you do that in the exam, you almost get an extra point. You almost get 101%. So I mean, you think, well, piece of cake, this, I'll get 100%. Well, you get 101% because it shows that even if you get things wrong, you know how to correct it. So what words have we got? We've got correction. So if you realize that you made a mistake, because we're going through this couple of weeks, if you think, oh, no, I made a mistake there, say correction and the new version. Or if you start thinking you're talking rubbish, just say disregard. So if you get into a bit of a situation in our time together here, just try using appropriate phraseology. I know it's difficult to remember the word when your brain's working sort of so hard, but if you can do that. Or if you don't get information, then say, Golf Charlie Delta, say again. And to get the information repeated, that doesn't pass it on to the next person because obviously it's one person at a time. But it means that you can get the information said again. So if you don't get it in our time together, don't hesitate to say again. The question from Ian says, how would the controller respond to the incorrect height? The controller just come back and say, Golf Charlie Delta negative. That's to report maintaining altitude 2,500 feet. So they'll just come back and sort of re-clarify what they want you to report passing. So they'll just come back and say, Golf Charlie Delta negative, just to indicate to you that it's wrong, and then what they want out of you. And talking of the chat, I must say thank you to Jen. I didn't say thank you to Jen previously. She put up the website for the Skyway code, and I'll copy that and I'll send that to you out with the email. So the call was to report maintaining 2,500 feet, which we discussed with David. And I think then I must admit, I've lost track slightly where I was. So let's say they said report leaving the frequency, Wilco, which I think Simon said. So who are we going to change to next? Well, we're heading towards the Banksfield military air traffic zone. And when we look at our frequencies, we've got two frequencies at Banksfield. We've got Banksfield Tower and we've got Banksfield radar. Now, the tower air traffic control frequency is responsible for everything moving off the ground, taking off and landing, and flying in the circuit. So the tower is just responsible out to the circuit. As soon as you go outside of the circuit, you become the responsibility of approach or radar. And approach and radar provide the same service. It's just the fact that radar provides an approach service with using radar. You can only call yourself radar if you're using radar. And of course, if you're not using radar, it's difficult to see where aircraft are. You're then based purely on pilot reports. So in a minute, Steve is going to say that we're changing to Banksfield radar, and I'll give Steve this new frequency in a minute. Then Jen is going to call up and request max penetration. So she's going to say Banksfield radar, our full call sign, request max penetration. And then Alan is going to have the honor of doing the partial message call. So as we said, apart from emergencies, it's the longest call you give. It's well worth practicing. Alan might have his head in his hands at the moment thinking, oh no, what did I do to deserve this? So let's give a bit of assistance. So call sign, we know is Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, or hopefully it'll be abbreviated to Golf Charlie Delta. What type, Alan, do you fancy using? We'll use whatever type you want to use.
I'll use a C42, please.
C42, why not indeed? So type is C42. Kind of question to everybody, what was our departure point? Well, it was Blackwood. What's our destination? It's Westerly. So that bit is easy enough, Alan. The next bit is our position. So that makes things a little bit more interesting. Some people might say well, in fact, some people would say, well, you've got to call up 15 miles or 5 minutes before. Don't worry about that too much, but let's use 15 miles. Of course, we're not going to say 15 because we know 15 and 50 can sound very much alike. And we know that we have to use separate digits. So 15 miles. Now, someone might say they're 15 miles from Banksfield. Well, yes, that is 15 miles from Banksfield. But so down here is 15 miles from Banksfield. And over here is 15 miles from Banksfield. And in fact, a whole circle around Banksfield, whoops, that didn't work very well, is 15 miles from Banksfield. So some people might say, well, northwest of Banksfield. Well, yes, that's northwest of Banksfield, but so is the left-hand side of the screen and also the wall on my left-hand side. So we need to put the two together to give an accurate position. So we give a distance, a compass point from a known position. And that known position could be Banksfield. So we could be 15 miles northwest of Banksfield, or we could be 7 miles southwest of Blackwood, or we could be 40 miles, and I'm just making up approximate distances here. We could be 40 miles northwest of North Point. So we can use any known position to give our position. So it's a distance, a compass point from a known place. Level, well, that encompasses height, altitude, or flight level. So Alan might want to be at, say, I don't know, altitude 2,000 feet, for example. And finally, additional details. Well, a good additional detail is that we're routing via North Point, because what we want to try to do in aviation is fly a straight line to wherever we want to go and just blag our way down that straight line, blag our way through control zones, blag our ways across our way across danger areas, prohibited areas, military air traffic zones. We all want to aim to fly this straight line because that's the quickest way to Wesley. It's the cheapest way to Wesley. So if we're renting the aircraft, cheapest way. Flying schools like us to zigzag because they get more money out of us. So if they can get us to go North Point down to South Head, they get twice as much money in the aircraft hire. So makes sense to zigzag, but we want to fly in a straight line. And you'd be surprised how often you can talk your way down a straight line to your destination. I'm going to hazard a guess and say 80% of the time, you'd be able to fly a straight line to wherever you want to go and request zone transit, request danger area crossing and things like that from the appropriate frequencies. So the controller will assume that we're going to fly in a straight line. So therefore it's worth saying that we're routing via North Point, because if a controller knows we've given our position and where we're going to next, so the controller can see exactly where we're going to fly through the mats. And because we've given our level as well, they can see in 3 dimensions where we're going to fly through the mats. Message from Jen: what if you have a radio but no transponder? Are you more likely to be refused? And the answer is yes, especially for flex wing like flights, because for the primary radar, there's not a lot of metal there for a radar return. So really, it's not a legal requirement to have a transponder, but boy, does it smooth the way for getting through airspace and things like that, because the controller can clearly and consistently see you on the radar screen. So back to this. So we know our call sign, Golf Charlie Delta. Alan's going to say we're C42. We're out of out of Blackwood, inbound to Wesley. Our position, which hopefully Alan's had to think about now, our level, and our additional details, routing via North Point. Or it could be that we're squawking 7,000 to indicate to the controller that we have a transponder. But the most important thing here is to think about this call before you establish communication. Have a think about this call. You could have these details written down on your flight book so you can start working out what you need to say. You could say it to yourself a couple of times before you establish communication without pressing the button. And as I say, to become proficient with this call, you can practice it in your car registration, car type, where you're going from, where you're going to, your position in relation to a nearby town. Obviously, not going to be very high level wise, and any appropriate details. But if you can get this call out, you sound really good. But you need to think about it before you say it. As soon as you call up, it's too late then, because they're going to say pass your message and expect a response. So it's Steve, please, who's going to say that we're changing to Banksfield radar on this new frequency. And I'll send you these new frequencies for next week, so I won't have to do this. 118.730. Whoops. So when you're ready, Steve, take it away.
Golf Charlie Delta, changing to Banksfield radar 118.730.
Good, excellent. Golf Charlie Delta, Roger. And then Jen, if you could call up just an initial call and request mass penetration. Although let's say before we do that, let's give Alan a fighting chance and just say, Alan, are you ready to do the partial message call? We don't want to drop you in it just by going straight in. Have you given it a bit of thought? Are you ready for action?
I am ready. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Good. In that case, Jen, take it away.
Banksfield radar, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, request MATS penetration.
Golf Charlie Delta, Banksfield radar, pass your message.
Golf Charlie Delta C42, Blackwood to Western, 15 miles west of Banksfield, altitude 2,500 feet, routing via North Point.
Excellent, excellent. And that's the call that you think, yeah, this guy knows what he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. So he'll approve your transit through the map. So no, that's fantastic, Alan. So the next long call comes to Anthony, because now they give you the approval to transit the maps that you have to read back. And I don't know if you got a pen. If not, I'll try and scribble a few things down. But if you got a pen, Anthony, to help you along here, they say to you, Golf Charlie Delta, MATS penetration approved, not above height 1,500 feet, QFE, correction, QFE 996 hectopascal.
MATS penetration approved, not above 1,500 feet, QFE 996 hectopascals, Golf Charlie Delta.
Excellent, excellent. And notice Anthony quite rightly included hectopascals because the pressure is less than 1,000. So that's great. Over to you, David. Golf Charlie Delta, that's correct. Report entering and report leaving the MATS.
Report entering and leaving the MATS, Golf Charlie Delta.
Good, so that works fine. What other way could you...
Golf Charlie Delta.
Exactly, it's only to demonstrate the different ways. And you might think, oh, I don't want to do any of those big long calls like everyone else does. I'll just say, Wilco, Golf Charlie Delta. And I'll say, well done, David. Fantastic, well done. So when you imagine yourself entering the MATS, Simon, quite simply, what do you think you'd say?
Entering the MATS zone, Golf Charlie Delta.
Now, two things there. Number one is you're initiating that kind of thread then, because it might have been 2 or 3 minutes. So it's your call sign at the start. And also, it's just known as a MATS, because if you said MATS zone, you're effectively saying military air traffic zone. Okay. So therefore, it's just entering the MATS. So just one more time, please, Simon.
Okay. Entering the MATS, Golf Alpha Charlie Delta. Oh, made a mess of that.
So disregard. You could say disregard.
Disregard.
And then we've forgotten that you've said it, sort of thing. So then you've got a clean sheet to come back to. So what would you say on the next? Simon, just have a think about it for a second if you want to. There's no need to dive straight in.
Banksfield MATS, entering the zone. Oh no, I'm making right big zero.
But that's why we're here, and that's no problem at all. And everyone thinks I would have been exactly the same. I would have been exactly the same, so there's no problem. So what we do is we say our abbreviated call sign, because we're initiated call. So Golf Charlie Delta, enter in the MATS. So we'll just have that one more time, please, Simon.
Okay, Golf Charlie Delta, entering MATS.
Golf Charlie Delta, Roger. Steve, when you imagine yourself leaving the MATS, what would you say?
Golf Charlie Delta, leaving MATS.
Over to you, Jen. Golf Charlie Delta, the Banksfield QNH is 1012. Report passing North Point.
Banksfield QNH 1012. Report passing North Point, Golf Charlie Delta.
Excellent, excellent. Or Jen could have said, Banksfield QNH 1012, Wilco, Golf Charlie Delta. And I'm not saying that one is right and one is wrong. It just shows that because there was that word report, you can, if you wish, say Wilco. Some airlines won't let their pilots say Wilco because, as was demonstrated by David earlier, how do we know we got the information correct if we say Wilco? And yet it's a nice tool in the box if you're very comfortable with what was said. Just be able to press the button and say Wilco, Golf Charlie Delta, and it makes it a short RT as well. So that's everything to do with the maths. So we'll be doing all this again next week. But let's move on to something a bit more interesting and interactive. So having got between Banksfield and North Point, we hear a mayday call from another aircraft. A mayday call that there's no reply to. And you imagine, how many items do you think you would get or remember or be able to write down if you heard a mayday call when you're going to expect the ground station to respond? So you hear the mayday call and you think, oh, poor guy. And you kind of comfortably fly along, and then you start thinking, that's strange. No one's ever replied to that mayday call. And then you think back to this RT course and you think, oh, crikey, I might have to relay it. So you think, well, I don't really want to do that. So I'll wait a few more seconds and hopefully someone else will relay it. So you wait a few seconds, no reply, and you think, oh, I'm going to have to do this myself. By then, how many items are you going to remember? Well, the more the better. But there's one thing I think is pretty well for sure. You're not going to be able to get everything. You might not get anything at all, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You might just get one or two items. If you got just a couple of items, probably the most important items to give would be, or to get, would be the aircraft's call sign and what's happened to the aircraft. Because the fact that the aircraft gave the mayday call on the Banksfield radar frequency means that they were on the Banksfield radar frequency. Because if they weren't, they would have given it on 121.5. If you're not on any frequency at the time, give your emergency call on 121.5. But if you're on a frequency, give your mayday call to that frequency. So therefore, if they're giving the mayday call on the Banksfield radar frequency, they've been on the Banksfield radar frequency. And if they've been on that frequency, they'll have done a partial message call. So therefore, air traffic control should know the type from a previous call, where it was going from, where it was going to, its position maybe 10 minutes ago, and sort of level. And it might have given it a squawk. So therefore, the call sign is a good thing to try and get. And what's happened? Sometimes you don't get anything at all. And you think, well, is there any point in relaying no information? And believe me, there is, because in air traffic, we get a lot of do-gooders who like to phone us up. And they phone us up and tell us they've seen an air miss, or they've seen an aircraft on fire, or they've seen an aircraft crash, or it's not even an aircraft, it's a UFO. They've seen 2 UFOs, and that normally happens at pub kicking out time. So the closer to pub kicking out time, the more chance it's going to be of a UFO report. But that's what they thought they saw. But you imagine a clear blue sky day when the jet trail's up at over 30,000 feet. And if someone looks up in the sky and they see 2 jet trails just miss each other, they think they've seen an air miss, when in fact those aircraft were vertically separated by, say, the required minimum of 1,000 feet. So there's plenty of vertical separation, but because they saw these 2 white trails just miss each other, they think they've seen an air miss. Or at night, these Chinese lanterns. I thought I'd seen an aircraft on fire when I saw a Chinese lantern. You know, it looks very sort of strange. Or they might have seen a radio control model aircraft go behind some trees and disappear. So quite often it's spurious, incorrect information. But if you call up and you say that you've heard a mayday on that frequency, but you weren't able to get any details, and then a member of the public phones up and says they've seen an aircraft land on a golf course, you become the professional qualification to the fact that there is an emergency going on. So we'll take more credence to the police that might have phoned in and they said they've had a report from a member of the public that an aircraft has landed on the golf course. So even if you don't get any information at all, don't just sweep it under the carpet and keep quiet. Use the relay phraseology, as we're going to talk about in a minute, and just say, unfortunately, you didn't get any details. Or if you only got a couple of items, just give those couple of items. The other thing to say is, if you think, oh, I didn't get the distance, I didn't get the position, don't make it up. Imagine the poor guy who's force landed in the field, the aircraft's flipped upside down, he's hanging in the seatbelt with the sort of fuel dripping from the wings, thinking, oh, well, at least the fire engine's going to be here any second, because I heard the aircraft start relaying my call. But that aircraft who relayed it thought, well, I didn't get the position, so I'll just make one up. Well, because I don't want to look stupid, that position they made up is where all the fire engine and ambulances are heading to. So if you're not sure about some information, don't give it, or say something along the lines, you think the pilot said this, because otherwise, if you give erroneous information, it could really spoil the guy's day who's landed in the field. So hopefully you'll get plenty of information. Now, the way to relay a call, this is the phraseology out of CAP 413. You say, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Who you're talking to, Banksfield radar, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, have intercepted Mayday from. And remember that intercepted Mayday from is to make it clear that it's not you that's in the Mayday call, but you're relaying it for someone else. So in the RT practical test, what you could do in your 20 minutes preparation, you could write Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Maybe you won't know who you're talking to at the time, so you could write just station call sign in parenthesis. Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, because you'll know your call sign, have intercepted Mayday from, and then have a blank bit of paper there, so that when you hear the Mayday call, you can jot down the details in your own shorthand. And then all you got to do is read it off, and that ticks the box for the relay Mayday part of the practical test. So the phraseology, the only bit of a phraseology really you need to know, Mayday, 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 because that's important. The Mayday, Mayday, Mayday means listen up on this frequency. Who you're talking to, your call sign, have intercepted Mayday from, and then everything you got. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of experiment. It's not as far side as the one we did last week with the headsets. What I want to do is I'm going to give a Mayday call, but I want our 6 volunteers to either jot it down or mentally remember as much as they can. So I'm going to give a Mayday call, and then I want all 6 then to relay it one by one. But what I don't want is you to fill in details from what the last person said. I want to try and demonstrate no one's necessarily going to get the same details. Distances could be misheard, levels could be misheard. You might not get nothing at all. You might not get any details, and therefore just relay it as if you didn't get any details. Some might get 3 items, some might get 6 items. You'll get different things. Please don't enhance your Mayday calls, because I want to prove that, you know, different people will give different information. When I ask you to do the Mayday relay, just give what you got. And that will be really interesting sort of experiment. So if you're ready, guys, I'll give you a Mayday call, and then I'll ask Alan to relay it, then Anthony, David, Simon, Steve, and then Jen, and we'll see what you got. But as I say, please don't enhance it with what the last person said. So here we go. So you hear Mayday, 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 Banksfield radar. This is Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima, PA-28, engine failure, forced landing, position 25 miles south of Banksfield, passing 400 feet, heading 260, student pilot. So that's the Mayday call. So, and it was probably just a touch slower than it would normally be. But when you relay it, guys, just use this phraseology up on the screen to start you off. But of course, it's Banksfield radar. So, Alan, if you're ready, and what the other thing that we're going to look at is how different digits are said. So it's a good sort of a good learning point of just how we say different digits, etc. So, Alan, when you're ready, if you could take it away with yours, please.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Banksfield radar, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta have intercepted Mayday from Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima, PA-28, engine failure, forced landing 25 miles south of Banksfield, passing 400 feet, 260 degrees, student pilot.
Excellent, excellent. But please, the others don't enhance yours. And hey, who knows that Alan's actually right? The only thing to say, Alan, I mean, it's excellent, excellent relay. But of course, you wouldn't say 25 miles, but 25 miles. 25 miles. Good. But it was a great call, believe me. Fantastic. Anthony, when you're ready, if you could fire away with yours, please.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Banksfield radar, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta have intercepted a Mayday from Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima, PA-28, engine failure, forced landing, position 25 miles to the south of Banksfield, passing 400 feet, heading 260, student pilot.
Excellent, excellent. I've nothing to say. Fantastic. David, with yours, please.
Mayday, 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 Banksfield radar. Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta has intercepted Mayday from Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima, PA-28, engine failure, forced landing 25 miles south of Banksfield, passing 400 feet, 260 degrees, student pilot.
Fantastic. I don't know if it's your microphone, but your engine seemed to be coughing in the background as well. But maybe
yes,
that was someone else's frequency.
Yes, she is, bless her. I'll just
that's fine.
Take this over. I'll
no,
take this over and put her on mute.
Yeah, no, don't worry. But that's excellent, David. Excellent. Simon, when you're ready, take it away.
Okay. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Banksfield radar, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta have intercepted Mayday call from Golf Papa Oscar Lima, P-28 with engine failure, forced to land possibly 25 miles south of Banksfield, 400 feet heading 260 degrees, student pilot.
Good, excellent. I like the possibly as well, because you've indicated that that's what you thought you heard, but you weren't quite sure. And at least it gives the controller a bit of flexibility that you might not be 100% on that. You'll have noticed Simon got Golf Papa Papa Oscar Lima, and that's what I was expecting to happen. So I'm really pleased we heard that, because I was hoping I could guarantee that if we heard that number of Maydays, they all wouldn't be the same, because we just give in what we humanly think we heard. So that was great. I really like that. Good. Steve, over with you.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Mansfield radar. Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, having intercepted Mayday from Golf Papa Papa Oscar Lima. PA 28. Engine failure. Force landing. Heading 260 degrees. Student pilot.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. And again, that's a great example. One, because Steve also got Golf Papa
The
Papa
height.
Oscar.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry, Kevin.
yes.
I thought that's what Simon said. Papa,
And
Papa,
that's what
Oscar.
Simon said. It was Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima was what I gave, but Simon gave Golf Papa Papa Oscar Lima. And what did you actually write down, Steve, on yours? Golf Papa Papa or Golf Papa?
No, sorry. I relayed what I thought I heard from Simon, which was Golf Papa Papa Oscar Lima.
Excellent, excellent. So it makes no, that's great, and that's just what I wanted to sort of point out, that we would get slightly different things. So that's perfect. And also, I don't think you gave a position, and that's fine, because we just give what we get. We're never going to get, in reality, more than about 3 items. So the things that you're getting is fantastic, but obviously it's different in the real world. So no, that was really good, Steve. That's great. And finally, Jen, if you could fire away with yours, please.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Banksfield radar. Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta have intercepted Mayday from Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima, PA 28, engine failure, forced landing. Position 25 miles south of Banksfield, passing 400 foot, heading 260, student pilot.
Fantastic. And all 6 guys are great. And I don't, the trouble is they're too good. I need more people who make mistakes so we can talk about those. So I'm hoping more people will volunteer next week, because making mistakes is good, just so that we can sort of talk about them. But all 6 of you, absolutely fantastic. So that's how we would relay the Mayday. But after a while, this aircraft in distress resolves their problem. And in this case, they carry out a forced landing, perfect forced landing in a field. And they think, oh, I'm safe. But I better tell Banksfield I'm safe and cancel the Mayday call. But they think, well, Banksfield radar didn't hear me up 400 feet, so they're not going to hear me down on the ground. But I did hear that Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta relay my Mayday, and hopefully if I call them, they will then relay my cancellation of the Mayday to the ground station. Now there's phraseology in the Radiotelephony manual for relaying the Mayday. There's phraseology for cancelling the Mayday. But there's no phraseology for relaying a cancelled Mayday. So we have to cobble it together. And the way that we do that is when we cancel the Mayday, we don't say Mayday, 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 because we're cancelling the Mayday. We just say, Banksfield radar, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta have intercepted cancel Mayday from Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima, and then what they say has happened. So it's just Banksfield Radar, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta have intercepted cancel Mayday from Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima, and what they said has happened. So back to hour 6 again for the same call before we move on. So Alan, again, you'll be first, Anthony, David, Simon, Steve, and Jen. And to make it fair, next week we'll go in the reverse order with anyone else that wants to volunteer as well. The more, the merrier. And these 6 people here will be thinking the more, the merrier, because the more people that volunteer, the less calls you actually have to do. So anyway, guys, you hear Golf Charlie Delta, this is Golf Oscar Lima, cancel Mayday. I say again, cancel Mayday, landed safely, will telephone the flying school. So they've said that they've cancelled Mayday, they've landed safely, and they've telephoned the flying school. People say, well, do I need to talk back to Golf Oscar Lima? And the answer is no, because they will hear you relay it to the ground station. So you can go straight in with the cancellation. So Alan, when you're ready, if you'd be so kind to take it away, please.
Banksfield Radar, Golf Charlie Delta. I've intercepted cancel Mayday from Golf Oscar Lima. Report landed safely and will telephone the flying school.
Perfect, perfect. Over to you, Anthony, for the same, please.
Banksfield Radar, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta have intercepted a cancelled Mayday from Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima. They have landed safely and will phone the flying school.
Excellent, excellent. David, yours, please, sir. And just remember, you're on mute. There we go.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
muted it because you were still coughing.
No, there's no problem at all. No problem at all. So when you're ready, David, take it away.
Banksfield Radar, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta has intercepted cancel Mayday from Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima, safe landed, and will telephone its flying school.
Fantastic. Great stuff. Same with you, Simon, please.
Banksfield Radar, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta have intercepted cancelled Mayday from Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima, have landed safely and will contact flying schools shortly.
Excellent, excellent. Steve, yours, please.
Banksfield Radar, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta have intercepted cancelled Mayday from Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima, reported landed safely, and they will contact flying school.
Excellent, excellent. Well done, Steve. And finally, Jen, please.
Banksfield Radar, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta have intercepted cancel Mayday from Golf Papa Oscar Oscar Lima, has landed safely, will contact flying school.
Excellent. Well done, Jen. That's great. And Alan, they come back to you and say, Golf Charlie Delta, Banksfield Radar, understand Golf Oscar Lima has cancelled Mayday, report passing North Point.
Wilco Golf Charlie Delta.
Very well said. Very well said. Now, one more thing we're going to do tonight. So we kind of leave the route at North Point now, and I just want to talk about position reports. Do you remember, I think it was in the second week, that we said you can sort of gain an extra point here and there by giving one of these procedural position reports. And the way that we go about doing that is we say, obviously our call sign, let's put that in the call sign, the position that we're passing, the time that we passed it, because of the old aviate, navigate, communicate. It might have been a couple of minutes ago, that we reported passing that position. No, sorry, that we passed that position. So it would be a couple of minutes ago at the time. Then our next position and estimated time of arrival. Now, so therefore, if we're at North Point, we think, oh, I fancy a go with one of these position reports. In reality, we just say pass it North Point. And that works for me as an air traffic controller, because if I'm talking to you and I'm just about to turn an aircraft onto the instrument landing system, the ILS, and an aircraft says, Golf Charlie Delta, North Point 1037, altitude 2,500 feet, estimate Newton at 1113. By then, that airliner has gone sailing through the center line over to the other side. The pilot thinks, oh, this is terrible. I'm sort of embarrassing it. Oh my goodness, I'm going to turn it back the other way and come on from the other side. So the normality is to just say, passing North Point, passing Newton. But we need to look at it because, of course, you might go on and do other flying. And we've already said that your license lasts a lifetime. So we just need to consider things that we might not necessarily do now. So this is this position report. Call sign, position, time, next position, ETA. So it'd be something like Golf Charlie Delta, North Point 46, altitude. Oh, I've missed one now. That's why. Position, level. That's where I've gone wrong. I thought it didn't look quite right. So it's call sign, position, and it's not very good for my recording here. Position, time, level, next position, and ETA. So Golf Charlie Delta, North Point 37, altitude 2,500 feet, Newton 1126, or whatever you want to give. So therefore, I'd like to go back to end the night on our 6 people, and I'd like Alan to do a position report at North Point, Anthony to do a position report at Newton, with South Head being the estimate. Then David to do the position report at South Head with the Whiskey Tango Yankee, and a bit of a tongue twister that just says how relaxed your jaw is there. Whiskey Tango Yankee, that's what we call it. It's just a notional point on the Wesley control zone boundary. And then Simon a position report at the Whiskey Tango Yankee with Wesley being the estimate. And then we'll go back to Steve doing North Point and Jen doing Newton. Just make up any time you want. But remember, when you get to 60, you need to start a new hour. If it's 7 minutes past the hour, it's 07, for example. But Alan, when you're ready, if you could take it away in this format here, please, for a position report at North Point.
Thanks, Field Radar. Position report, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta. Passing North Point, time 33, 2,500 feet. Next position, Newton, ETA. (17).
Good. You could, yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. And this is why we're here, just to get the practice. You don't need to say position report, and you're kind of already up the frequency. So you can just say Golf Charlie Delta, position, time, level, next position, ETA. What I'd like you to do, the people that are following behind Alan, is to look at cutting your RT down to the bare minimum, something like Golf Charlie Delta, North Point 56, 2,500 feet, Newton 47. So you don't even need to say any of these numbers here because it's in a standard format. You can just give the values. So Anthony, if you'd like to have a go at that, please.
Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta at Newton, minute 46, altitude 4,500, South Head, minute 56.
Good, excellent. Minute is a bit of a sort of military sort of way of doing it. I'm not saying it's wrong, but if you give just 2 digits, it's obviously a minute because 56 can't be an hour. So it just 0.56 would also be sufficient. And thinking how we can cut it down to the bare minimum. I'm not saying you're wrong with the minute, Anthony. It's a more kind of military, UK military style phraseology saying the word minute, but that's fine. That's great. David, when you're ready, your last go for tonight. If you could give me one for South Head, please.
Banksfield Radar Golf Charlie Delta was South Head 12, flight level 35, ETA Whiskey Tango Yankee 21.
Wow, that's very cool. Very laid back. I'm very impressed there. So that's great. Thanks, David. Simon, if you could go for the one at Whiskey Tango Yankee, please, with Wesley, the estimate.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. Not quite ready yet. Okay. Give us a sec.
Yeah, no problem. In fact, if you want just to have a think about it, Steve,
Okay.
if you could go back, we'll come back to Simon at the end. Steve,
Yeah,
if you could, yeah, why not? Steve, when you're ready, fire away with the 0.1 estimate for Newton.
Okay. Golf Charlie Delta, 0.35, 2,500 foot, Newton 55.
Fantastic. That's great. Thanks, Steve. And Jen, if you could give me one at Newton with South Head being the estimate.
Golf Charlie Delta, Newton 32, 2,500 foot, South Head 47.
Fantastic. And Jen's is a fine example there of how you can cut it right down to the minimum. And it sounds really good. If you feel that you're sounding a bit short with the controller, you're probably talking perfectly. It's just cutting out those spurious words. It's a bit like a position report where you don't say call sign, you don't say the word type, you don't say departure point. You can say Golf Charlie Delta, C42, Dairy House Farm to Barton, 5 miles south of Crewe, altitude 1,300 feet, something like that. So you don't need to say the actual sort of bits here. So Simon, do you want to have a final go to end the evening here?
Certainly. Golf Charlie Delta, Whiskey Tango Yankee 33, 2,500 QNH, Wesley ETA 28.
Perfect. And that's what we're going to end on tonight. So that's great, guys. And a massive thank you to our 6 volunteers, because there's great value in sort of the practice in, now's the time to make mistakes, pick it up, and that's great. So what we're going to do next week, we're not going to do any multiple choice questions because I can send you the multiple choice questions if you want questions again. I would just want to concentrate on the practical. And from an RT point of view, we are halfway through this route. I know geographically we're only a third of the way through, but in the amount of RT required, we're halfway. So what we're going to do when we meet at 7 o'clock next week, hopefully we'll have a few more volunteers to think, yeah, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And we'll start off at Blackwood, all the same again, all the same through the maps. We'll do a relay Mayday, cancel the Mayday, And then after North Point, we're going to look at getting a QT from Tidemouth. After Newton, we're going to look at the Pancall, and everyone can give their Pancall. And then we're going to come down, look at going into Wesley, and then we'll take a couple of steps back and look at going into Tidemouth. And from now on, it's just practice, practice, practice. You're seeing how the format works now, how you give a call sign at the start when you start the call sign at the end when you're replying to the call, when you can say we'll go, but the things that you have to read back. So, and Michael's question is, can I forward the details availability for the theory test and where at, etc.? No problem at all. I'll update my availability tomorrow. And I think I'm in air traffic this weekend and then I'm off for a couple of weeks. So I've got loads of availability. Be really good to get your multiple choice exams done, because then you can think, oh, it's just a practical test to do now. And of course, what we're going to do is we're going to practice next week. And then before you do the practical test itself, we're going to meet on a one-to-one basis and go through this over a couple of hours, run through it a couple of times, just to keep building up your prowess. And then hopefully then you'll be comfortable to then do it as the practical test. And we'll talk more about that next week.